Hi, this is Andrea Schwartz with another edition of Homeschooling Help, and that's my buddy over there from across the country, Nancy Wilk.
Hello, Andrea. It's December 2018 at the time of this broadcast. Everybody's busy decorating, shopping, preparing for Christmas, finishing up their curriculum. And so I know we want to do something a little bit different. So indulge me, please, while I borrow from Charles Dickens' work, A Christmas Carol, and take a look at the spirit of homeschooling, past, present, and future. So we have as our guest today Ann Miller. She is a mom of 8, grandma of almost 15. In her family, there are engineers and actually a real live rocket scientist.
More than
so that's
one.
the important things about Ann. What she does for her day job is that she's the president and executive director of the Home Educators Association of Virginia. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and around here we call it HEAVE, H-E-A. So welcome to our broadcast, Ann. We appreciate you being on.
Oh, thank you, Nancy and Andrea. I'm really glad to be here.
So before we actually started our broadcast, we had a little time to talk, and Ann and I were debating which one of us was more of the pioneer of homeschooling.
You win.
I win by only a couple of years, but with 8 children and 15 grandchildren and a family, who she has 2 younger siblings who were homeschooled. Somehow or other, I think you get the pioneer label more so than I did.
I don't know. Anyone who schooled in the 80s gets the pioneer label.
Okay.
Pioneer. Okay, so I want to just say that 35 years ago, it was 1983, your operational headquarters was a card table set up in the General Assembly building by 3 homeschool moms. So I think that is awesome. But one of the things that I really want to bring out in terms of the spirit of homeschool is to make note that we each personally affirm and represent organizations that hold to the biblical position that educating children is a God-given right and responsibility of the family. Now, we understand that not everyone makes that assertion, and there's other very good reasons for family to decide to homeschool, and we would recognize and support them all. But with that being said, for folks who may not recognize homeschool as a religious freedom, let's talk about what was going on in those early days. Ann?
Well, I just want to be clear, and I hope I didn't give the impression, I was not there with HEAV in 1983. Okay. We did not learn about HEAV until 1986. It was the year we had to submit, we knew about a notice of intent. The law was about two years old at that point. And, but we had a conviction that it was our responsibility to educate our children. And through that conviction, we didn't feel that the government had responsibility for the education of our child, so why should we notify our school superintendent? So we were kind of in a conundrum and just really praying through, like, what would we do? And that's when we learned about HEAV and religious exemption. And when we learned about the religious exemption, we realized that fit our convictions and our beliefs. And so HEAV saved the day for us because we didn't feel right going under the state authority in the education of our children. So
can I just interject something here? And this is important for people who are listening. When we talk about exemption, we're not talking about a right that the state gives people.
Exactly.
We're talking about an area where the state has no jurisdiction. So when we say something is exempt from state control, we're saying it's because the state never had control of it in the first place. So the same way, your children or grandchildren are exempt from me giving them a bedtime. In other words, I might have really good ideas as to when people should go to bed, but I have no jurisdiction. So when we're talking about exemption, we're talking about areas of jurisdiction.
Exactly. And they're state recognized. I was pulling up, I was looking at some of the attorneys general opinions on home education, on religious exemption, and one of them, well, there's so many, but oh, I have so many quotes here. I'm just trying to think which is the worst. In the Johnson, let's see. Well,
you can give us the gist of it. Give us the gist of it.
Well, that the state has no ability to judge the validity of a belief, only that it is bona fide and sincerely held. It's a sincerely held conviction. And that Mary Sue Terry in 1988, and this comes to the Loudoun County issue, she, in her opinion in 1988, she said, the General Assembly has provided a complete exemption from compulsory school attendance for a child excused on religious grounds. It is my opinion, therefore, that a school system lacks the authority to monitor the educational growth of a child through regular testing. And that's at the one of the basis of the Loudoun County initiative. They want to make sure that children are getting an education, and it's been suggested that the way to do that is just take part of the statute from the home instruction statute, which requires the testing and accountability, and just move that and put it on the religious exemption statute, which are two separate statutes. And
so I'm going to interrupt you. I think it's important for us to frame this so people understand.
Yeah, it's just jumped right into the.
No, and that's fine, because that's really what's on your heart, because you're facing this at this point. We need to understand that we've been conditioned to think that just because somebody is interested in helping us, they necessarily have the best intentions, or even if they have good intentions, that they'll be profitable for the people who they're inflicting it on. And so we've all grown up in a situation where we think, well, yeah, everybody should have an education, and everybody should have an education. The question is, who is going to mandate it? Who is going to oversee it? And then who's going to tell you if you're doing a good job or not?
Right. And the question with religious exemption, it's not an education statute. It's an exemption from attendance at school. It's not an exemption because of religious training or beliefs. So it's not an exemption from teaching your children. It's an exemption from attendance at school, because you have that bona fide religious conviction, not a moral conviction or a philosophical conviction, but a religious conviction, that you believe that your God is directing you through his word and through his speaking to you in your life, that this is what God has called you to.
Mm-hmm. Right. For those that also may not know some of the history about this in legal terms, Andrea and both you guys may remember that Leeper case, which was the big homeschool case in Texas,
in Arlington.
The dad said, you know, he opposed the attendance laws, and I think Dr. Rushdoony was a expert witness in that case, and it was 9-0 shut down. That you know, the dad was right, Rushdoony's right. Our Constitution protects our inalienable rights, the God-given rights to do this. So that's a history of homeschool that a lot of current listeners may not recognize how important homeschooling is in terms of religious freedom.
And let me add, because you brought up the Leeper case. The Leeper case was a great case because homeschoolers went on the offensive. They were the plaintiffs in the case. They were saying, you can't do this. It wasn't that they were defending their right. They were basically putting the state into a situation to say, you're sticking your nose in where it doesn't belong. And I think too often homeschoolers get into this defensive posture that says, we just want people to leave us alone, and we'll give them a little bit of this and we'll give them a little bit of that. That's the deadly way to go, because as soon as they say they can have your children 5 days a week, 10 months out of the year, then guess what they start saying? You can only have certain things that they learn in science, or they're only things they can learn in philosophy. Oh, and by the way, you must vaccinate them whether or not you think that's a good idea. So you open the door a little bit, and then, the camel's all the way in.
Yeah, and you can't visit them at lunchtime either, which has been in the news recently.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's that's where homeschooling, some of the history, the spirit of homeschooling is in exercising our God-assigned responsibility and faithfulness to Him. So let's talk a little bit. You kind of already breached that topic somewhat, but homeschooling present. I want for our listeners to know that right now homeschool is a legal option in every state, although guidelines and the reporting requirements do vary. But as you pointed out, Andrea, we're really just giving the state authority in a place that God has not given it to them. What our listeners might not know, and this is very, very important, is that Virginia is the only state with a true religious exemption. And that is enormous. And that's why this Loudoun County conversation is important. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Anne? Is that...
Well, my notes are all over the place here. Judge Fiddler gave an opinion about on religious exemption, and one of the things he said was, and I love this, that he said, quote, that we have the broadest religious exemption of any state. And he also said that the VA statute for religious freedom was enacted on January 16th, 1786.
So it's got some staying power.
It got some staying power. So, I mean, Virginia just has such a foundation of religious freedom, and that he said it sets the tone and direction of religious liberty in this state. So while other states may do what they do, Virginia is founded on religious freedom. It's one of our basic liberties. And he said Article 1, Section 16 of the Constitution of Virginia spells out in rather inescapable language what the free exercise of religion means. So this is Judge Fiddler has this opinion: all men are equally entitled to the free exercise of religion according to the dictates of conscience. And there's some part taken out, but it shall be left to every person to select his religious instructor. So we do have that heritage of religious freedom from our founding documents, and it's important, and it's the basis. It's a God-given freedom. It's not a state-given freedom, and what God's given, the state should not be taking away.
So there are a lot of people who homeschool who are the products of a public school education.
Right.
And as a result, there are some things they probably have not examined. And it's important that as you're teaching your children, you also teach yourself, because there's a lot of unlearning that has to take place.
Yes.
If you think the state, that we have compulsory education laws, somebody is truant. Okay, we don't want to be truant. We have to obey this law. Well, first of all, it's your individual right to say this is right or wrong. However, if you don't examine the presuppositions of the law and you don't understand what's at the base of it, you might proceed actually working contrary to your own interests as a Christian homeschool family. That's why it's so important to make use of people who have been in the trenches for a long time and not decide, oh, I started homeschooling a year ago, I'm now going to go launch this fight, if you don't even know what you're doing.
Right. Right. And on the HAV website, if I can mention, we do have a link under the Virginia law on religious exemption, and there are attorney opinions. The Judge Fiddler's opinion is there. Reference to Mary Sue Terry's opinion is there. that people can go and educate themselves.
Now, why this is useful for people who don't happen to live in Virginia or Loudoun County is because this is a good model to say, wait a minute, let's examine how our county is organized, or how our state is organized. And then instead of being on the defensive, being on the offensive, knowing that the scripture says that the gates of hell will not prevail against Christ's church. That doesn't mean people who are cowering in the corner hoping nobody bothers them. People who are standing for what God has commanded them to do. So I would say homeschooling is much more than a right. Christian education is a duty given to parents, and no state should be able to tell us we cannot obey God.
Right.
Another thing that I think is important here is we're talking to homeschoolers because this is Homeschool Help broadcast, and we're talking with Ann with the Home Educators Association of Virginia. But because this is an issue of religious freedom and the expression of our understanding of a God-assigned task, whether you homeschool or not, whether you're Christian or not, is beside the point. You need to, I would encourage people to support this effort and to exercise our freedom, because if we don't, we stand to lose our freedom. And that is, we're starting to get into the homeschool future, but that's okay, because that's important. You know, if we don't exercise our rights, if we don't understand this as an issue of religious freedom, and worse yet, if we fail to obey God, then we are at great risk, not just now in our homeschooling freedom, but as a people in this country and a people before God. Right. So that's why I think this stuff is so important, and I want folks to understand.
Right. But let me add, you used a great term. Instead of saying we need to demand our rights, we need to exercise our rights.
Yes.
Anybody who has gotten older knows that if you don't exercise it, it gets flabby and it doesn't work as you want it to work. The same is true in our lives as Christians in the public sphere. If we don't exercise our rights and we act as though somebody legitimately throws us crumbs, we need to say, no, that's not true. And some people shy away from resisting it because they'll think, well, I'll get in trouble, or maybe things won't go well for me. Well, we have forebears in the faith who worked really hard to see to it that we could secure the rights that God has given us that are inalienable. And we have to really understand what inalienable means. It means we can't even give them up either. They're not ours to give.
Right. And I will say that the religious exemption statute is there for people who have that bona fide conviction against attendance at school. But there are many, many believers who homeschool under the home instruction statute, and their conscience, they're okay with that. Their conscience is okay with that. And we have great laws here in Virginia. They're moderate, they're not onerous. And but that religious exemption is so foundational to our freedoms in education that we don't want to lose it. And the notice of intent statute is there, but that cannot accommodate people who have that conviction against attendance at school.
Right. So, Ann, what are some of the reasons people don't want their children to have to attend schools?
Whoa. Well,
I realize that's a loaded question. I just threw a ball that you can hit a home run with, but I want you to hit the home run.
Yeah. Well, let me qualify. We have a lot of friends who are teachers at school, and my husband was a public school teacher. We have the greatest respect for educators. Most of the educators that are out there, they're trying to do a good job. We have a system, though. We have a broken system. And the whole compulsory education statute, honestly, was based on a Prussian model that was designed to produce docile, compliant workers who essentially move at the ring of the bell. The class bell rings. There's nothing so important as moving to the next class. Doesn't matter how engaged you are in a topic. And So we have a broken system, and of course moral decline in our country as we turn away from the Lord's ways. And so their public schools are there. We get calls every day from parents whose children are suffering from anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts because of bullying, peer pressure, the environment in many of the classrooms. And we had one call from a parent that went on and on about their son, suicidal. They found him behind the computers where all the electronic and the wiring was, because he thought he could electrocute himself and kill himself. And they talked for a long time, and our office manager said, so how old is your son? He was in second grade.
Oh my goodness.
Second grade. We get calls like that from parents all the time. They are desperate because God's put it in their heart to do what's right for their children. And we see it as a call of the Lord, turning hearts of the parents to the children, the fathers to the children, and the children to the fathers. We really believe that God is using home education in that way. And parents are desperate. We get such desperate calls. We just got a call a couple of weeks ago from a mom who has a twin baby who's never come home because they keep dying and they have to resuscitate. And she wanted to homeschool. The school gave her a hard time. She just wanted to homeschool her other son. And she called our office, and we were able to help her. But he was anxiety-ridden, depressed. I mean, babies. I mean, these are babies in elementary school, and then high school is even worse. So the conditions, the moral conditions, erode the ability to actually receive an education. And parents want their children to be educated, but they also want them to be safe.
Exactly.
And so when we started homeschooling, we felt called from the Lord. Well, I'm assuming that you did, Nancy.
Yeah.
We grow in our convictions. Our convictions change. And so people who may not be where we are now in our convictions, many of us, we weren't where we are now in our convictions when we, 30 years ago, 35 years ago. So,
well, on that point, let me tell you, when I first started homeschooling, when my son wasn't being cooperative, I would say, okay, if you do this, I'm going to send you to outside school. I'm going to send you to outside school, until one day I realized what I was threatening. And it was like, okay, if you're not good, I'm going to let you out of the car, leave you by the side of the road, and never come back and get you. I would never have threatened him that way. Right. And so that stopped being the way in which I dealt with defiance or reluctance, that I wasn't going to threaten something that I thought was awful, that I never was going to do willingly.
Right. Right.
Well, for me, the conviction grew from the scripture that says that we're supposed to train up our children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And I thought, how can I do that if I put my kid on the bus at 6:30 in the morning and don't get them off until 6 o'clock at night after they've been to school and been to after school care, and I pick them up on my way home? How can I really do that faithfully? How can I be faithful to that responsibility if they're not with me? And so I recognize that, if nothing else, that this is what I understood God said for me to do as a parent, and that if our responsibility is to the nurture and admonition of the Lord, that the public school system wasn't helping me do that. Now, there was a season in our life when, as a single mom, all my kids were in public school. And that was only because, while I still held the conviction, there were requirements to homeschool, requirements to be educating. And I didn't have the faith or the confidence or the support of others that could come alongside, like you guys are doing at Heave, and like there are, because we have been down that road and have grown in our conviction, that now we could say to that single mom or to someone else to say, no, there is help. You can do this. This is God's call on your life. for those kids, and we're here to help you. So that's one of the things that I really appreciate about Heave and Chalcedon, that you guys are both encouraging and supporting families to walk in God's call on their life and to be faithful to His government and authority over us.
Now, one of the things that I think is remarkable is that, and you're willing to say, a true religious conviction. This religious exemption, and we've talked about what exemption means, is not just a box to check so that you don't have to do something you don't want to do. A true religious conviction includes that I would die for my beliefs, much the same way the apostles had true religious convictions. And so for those people who might say, well, I'm not sure how solid my convictions are, that's one of the reasons why for the last 20 years, I have been working with homeschool moms and wives and moms in general to understand God's law, to understand the requirements, because quite apart from protecting our children from immoral ideas or sexuality at an early age, there's the truth of God's word that will never be imparted in a public school.
Right.
And so there's the negative we want to keep people from, but there's the positive of educating people God's way.
Yes, yes.
So what is happening in terms of, you said that there was a meeting tonight of the legislative committee in Virginia. What do you anticipate is going to happen, and what's the organized response against it?
Well, the school board meeting went till after 11 o'clock last week, and they decided to take it up in the committee again, their legislative committee, because they realized there were aspects to this that maybe they didn't understand, maybe they were wrong. There were a lot of people of goodwill who came out and spoke against it, so they said they would take it up in their meeting tonight. It's not a meeting that's open for public comment, but what we're encouraging families to do who can is just to show up, just to show that there are a lot of people concerned about this, because what is happening is they're taking the Loudoun County School Board's legislative agenda and they're presenting it to the legislators for their county on December 7th. And so they're looking for sponsors for these various bills. And the religious exemption, and it's not, I mean, they were kind of puzzled by why we said it was a repeal. And honestly, I don't think they understand religious freedom. I think that's the foundation of not understanding what religious freedom means, because they just saw it as a simple, like, just take this part of this statute and put it to this statute, not understanding the convictions that people would have against that government control. But they are looking for sponsors, and those legislators are going to come down to Richmond to the General Assembly, and then they're going to legislate for this bill. And we're hoping that by showing that there are many people who are concerned, who want to stand up for religious freedom, that it would discourage the legislators, because it will be an uphill battle. There will be a great outcry, and we encourage families, even if you're not religious exemption, you need to protect the rights of families who have those religious convictions. And what it made me think of, and I pulled it out, was that little poem by it was a Lutheran pastor. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. But then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I'm not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I'm not a Jew. But then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. And when we look at the religious exemption, everyone needs to protect our religious freedoms and our religious rights, because it's a foundational right that we have. And it will be the gradual erosion of other rights. If they can take away religious freedom in this area of education, they can continue to take religious freedom away of how we bake cakes, or, do photography, or, all those issues. And
So how can people who aren't Virginians or aren't members or residents of Loudoun County, how can people, because I'm hoping that people who are watching this will say, okay, I want to help. How could I help? What do you think would be a good protocol for us?
Well, number one, pray. Prayer, we have seen God work miracles. When the religious exemption question first came up in 2014, we just prayed, and that the people, there was someone coming to testify. We just prayed they would hear a voice from a far country and leave, which is scriptural. And amazingly, they were there to testify in favor of losing the religious exemptions, studying it. Actually, it wasn't a question of whether they would change it at that point. But somehow they had to get on a plane and fly to California, and they weren't there to testify when the time came. So we just see God answer prayer. So prayer is number one. Financial support for HEAV would be much appreciated. We have a lot of work. We initiated a study earlier this year, and we're just getting ready to publish it on religious exemption because we knew this battle was coming, and we've been trying to prepare. If you're close enough to go to Loudoun County, I would say go tonight. Also, if you're in Virginia, I would encourage you to monitor your school board meetings. We've been setting up a network to monitor the school board meetings because often things like this happen at the local level. I had a conversation today where someone said, well, why should I go to Loudoun County? I'm not a Loudoun County resident. It's a local issue. It may have been initiated locally by the school board there, but it will be an initiative that will affect every family in the state. And so it's not just a local initiative. And I would encourage people around the country to keep an eye on your school boards, keep an eye on your Department of Education, support your state organizations. There are state organizations in every state, and they need you. They need your support. They need volunteers. They need funding. They need your prayer support, because they are the ground troops who are protecting our freedoms and our rights to teach and train our children at home. And HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association, they have a listing of all the state organizations. You can find it there for your own state. But get involved, be aware. Our freedoms are just one legislative session away from being taken away.
And let me say, it may sound like I'm patting myself on the back, and maybe I am a little bit, but what happens after you're done homeschooling your children? You see, the three of us represent people who have lots of experience, what not to do, what to do, how to amend things and whatnot. And we have a responsibility to help, and we're doing it. But those moms who are currently in the trenches of homeschooling, your kids are going to grow up. Don't then say, I wonder what I can do to fulfill myself. Maybe I'll go back to school and get my art major. Or I'm not putting down art majors. What I'm saying is we have work to do. And there's Titus II mentoring that has to take place because we appreciated the people who came alongside us and helped us. But this is an ongoing thing. So moms now need to understand the threats that are down the line that won't necessarily be there for their children, but what about their grandchildren? I mean, Anne, you've got 15. Nancy, how many do you have? How many grandchildren do you have?
8, I think.
Oh, 8 she thinks. She's financial. And I have 3, and hopefully more in the future. So we have a stake in the future, and we should. We do. And we're HEAV. We've started at our convention. We'd like to see it grow, but we're starting at convention with Titus II mentors. And we started this year where we had the older men and women, because Titus II is for men too. So we have dads and moms who come, and they've given tours. They're there to answer questions. They take people around to orient them to the convention center, but also they're answering questions and pointing out resources and things that could be helpful for them in their homeschool journey. And we're looking to expand that to have more one-on-one mentoring. If people want a mentor, that we have, we're looking for the retired homeschool moms and dads to come and speak into the lives of these families.
who come to convention. We have 12 or 13,000 people who come to convention, and many, I would say about a third of those are brand new homeschoolers and looking for help. And this generation, my understanding from them is they want mentors. They want someone to come and speak into their lives. And what better than homeschool moms who've run the course, got the prize. Didn't get a gold watch for my 30 plus years though, but hey. And
we got gray hairs though.
Yeah,
hairs.
They're there. But we need you. We need you. And this new generation needs you. And so consider volunteering with your state organizations. That's a simple way to get involved. There are plenty of moms. Phone calls. Every day we get phone calls from desperate moms. We have trained a whole contingent of counselors to be able to answer questions, to be there for support, to connect people locally. And wherever you are in the country, your organization needs people like you who are willing to step up and speak into people's lives and support and encourage them.
Well, thank you, Anne. You've encouraged me, and maybe we'll bring you back again to tell us how things are progressing.
Yeah, and I would love to suggest that you get Yvonne Bond, who is our Director of Government Affairs, and she is the one who normally handles all the legislative action and all. And she's been with HEAV as long as I have. We've been here almost 30 years, and she is a wealth of information, and she has helped. I don't know. I would guess 100,000 people. She's helped tens of thousands to begin homeschooling through her years. She's an excellent resource.
Yeah. Empowered women. That's who we are, and that's what we need to be. And I have a friend who doesn't like the term feminist, and I don't either, but she says that she's radically female. And we are radically female, radically feminine, in as much as we've learned how to protect our cubs, and now helping other women learn how to nurture and protect theirs.
Yeah. The virtuous woman was a powerhouse. She was no doormat.
Not at all.
And she was active in community and business and in the lives of the people around her. And I've watched some of your broadcasts, and so much of your teaching is so excellent and convicting. Yeah, I was listening to one of your programs on coveting, and it was like, I never thought of it that way. So I love what you're doing to help teach moms the foundational principles that we didn't get when we were growing up.
Right. And let me make a plug for the Chalcedon Teacher Training Institute. You can find it at chalcedonteachertraininginstitute.com or ctti.org. And it's all about training women in biblical law and understanding. So when the next challenge comes up, we know how to approach it. That's one of the things that seasoned homeschoolers can do. We know what the threats have been in the past. And yeah, maybe there's a new face to it, but we can recognize the same nastiness at the base of it. And that's why we need to sort of work together and not be so concerned of who gets the credit, because the Lord gets the credit. We're all here still because God deserves the glory.
Yes,
absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
Do you have any closing thoughts before I give mine?
You give your closing thoughts, Nancy.
All right, ladies. Well, we started with a Christmas theme, and I want to end with a Christmas theme. I want to remind our listeners of Isaiah 9:6-7. It says, "For unto you a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end, upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this." Ladies, I want to encourage everyone listening that our task is to declare the faithfulness of God and point to Him, and He will have His way with us. I pray that we're faithful to that.
Amen.
All right. Well, I don't think there's anything either Ann and I could add to that to make it better. You quoted Isaiah. We'll end with Isaiah. And everybody, we will talk to you all next time. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.